Welcome back to Chapter 21 of To Kill a Mockingbird. Chapter 21 starts with Calpurnia coming to get the children. They've been missing. Aunt Alexandra has been worried. They go home for supper, but Atticus has promised them to be allowed to return afterwards to hear the verdict. He does state that the verdict will probably be delivered before they return. Calpurnia gives Jim hell for being at the trial. She says it's unfitting for Scout to hear such talk, and she probably has a good idea that Tom will be convicted. The kids return to the court around 8 p.m., about an hour after they left. The jury's been out for a half an hour. We then get Jim's view of rape, which happens on 239. This is a discussion between him and Reverend Sykes. Jim feels there's no way that they can convict Tom Robinson. Reverend Sykes says, "Now don't you be so confident, Mr. Jim. I ain't ever seen any jury decide in the favor of a colored man over a white man." But Jim gives his definitions of rape. "It wasn't rape if she let you, but she had to be 18, in Alabama, that is. And Mayella was 19. Apparently you had to kick and holler. You had to be overpowered and stomped on, preferably knocked stone cold. If you were under 18, you didn't have to go through all this." And of course, there's no evidence that Tom Robinson has done that, did not knock her stone cold. And according to his testimony, it was her that was willing to, try to embrace Tom Robinson. After that, you get around 11 o'clock, Scout, who fell asleep, sort of wakes up and begins to count the heads of those people in the courthouse. "I jerked awake and made an honest effort to remain so, by looking down and concentrating on the heads below. There were 16 bald ones, 14 men that could pass for redheads, 40 heads varying between brown and black. And I remembered something Jim had said once, and she talks about this idea that if enough people wished psychically that Tom Robinson would be free, then it would happen. But note that she counts 70 people there in the bottom of the floor of the courthouse. 70 people at 11 p.m. They've been sitting there for over 3.5 hours, waiting for this verdict to return. So it's been a long time. And then we get these two sort of references back to the winter. One sort of a reference to the fire or after the fire, and another to Atticus shooting the mad dog. "The feeling grew until the atmosphere in the courtroom was exactly the same as a cold February morning when the mockingbirds were still and the carpenters had stopped hammering on Miss Maudie's new house, and every wood door in the neighborhood was shut as tight as the doors of the Radley place. A steaming summer night was no different from a winter morning." There's a couple of important things here. One, the mockingbirds are silent. Remember, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because all mockingbirds do is sing their hearts out for people. Two, the carpenters have stopped building, so nothing is being built. And three, you have all the doors of the neighborhood shut tight, perhaps locked. And metaphorically, this is, sort of a sign of unfriendliness. It's the unwelcoming. It's not like the night of the fire where everyone is out helping one another. Everyone is closed off from one another. Note the fire happens in November, right around the time when Tom Robinson is convicted of rape. This is a few months later. You also have this reference to Atticus shooting the mad dog. Mr. Tate enters the courtroom and calls the courtroom to order. Mr. Tate said, "The court will come to order." What happened after that had a dream-like quality. "In a dream, I saw the jury return, moving like underwater swimmers, and Judge Taylor's voice come from far away and was tiny. I saw something only a lawyer's child could be expected to see, could be expected to watch for, and it was like watching Atticus walk into the street, raise a rifle to his shoulder, and pull the trigger. but watching all the time knowing that the gun was empty. So it's like Atticus is going to shoot the mad dog of racism in this court, but his gun is empty, and Tom Robinson is convicted. Scott goes on to say that she's learned that a jury never looks at a defendant that is convicted, and when it enters the courtroom, it does not look at Tom Robinson. We have last so Tom Robinson is convicted. Atticus leaves the courtroom, and as he's leaving, Reverend Sykes says, "Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Your father's passing." So that's how the chapter ends, with Atticus leaving the courtroom, having lost, but holding his head high. There's a couple things we haven't talked about. Some meaning of names here. Calpurnia. Calpurnia is a flower. It's a South African flower. That South Africa is another country that has had a historical problem with race, black and white race. It's also a flower that is symbolic of healing and protection. Note that Calpurnia is the Scott and Jim's sort of mother figure. Then we have Atticus. Atticus means belonging to Attica. Attica is the region where Athens is located. Athens was the birthplace of democracy. Atticus is an ancient name. The U.S. is, it goes way back to Roman times. So it's apt for Atticus's name to be, related to Athens, because he does believe in democracy. He does believe in the rights of the citizens. He does believe in laws in the courtroom. Atticus is also an Abraham Lincoln type of character. Note that when he leaves the courtroom and all the African American community stands up, it is showing its appreciation for his fight. Both Atticus and Lincoln were lawyers. They were both self-educated in their early childhood. And there's actually scholarly articles on this comparing Atticus to Lincoln, particularly in the art of setting up the trap. Note that Atticus sets up the trap for Bob Ewell by asking him to write his name, knowing that Bob Ewell is probably left-handed, and knowing that Tom Robinson can't use his left hand. Lincoln also set a trap for Stephen Douglas. Note that Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas were running for a Senate seat in 1858, and they had these series of debates over the issues of slavery. And the trap that Lincoln set for Douglas, he asked Douglas to reconcile the Dred Scott case, which denied Congress the power to exclude slavery. The Dred Scott case looked at slaves as property, and the U.S. government did not have the right to deny anyone their property, no matter where they took it. And so to reconcile the Dred Scott case with the popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty was the right of a territory to decide whether it was going to be free or slave. Note that any way Douglas answered the question, he would alienate part of his party, whether it would be the Northern Free Soilers or the pro-slave South. Douglas was a Democrat. Lincoln was from a new party of the Republican Party. Douglas ends up winning the Senate seat, but he ends up losing the 1860 election as a cause from these debates. So the idea here is Atticus loses the court case. Perhaps he will win something larger in the future. Okay, so that's it for chapter 21. This ends sort of the courtroom section of the novel. We'll sort of recap that tomorrow and begin chapter 22. So I'll give you a recap tomorrow and we'll move on. All right, thank you. See you tomorrow. Hope that helps.